Ah, the wonderful world of low, no-budget, straight-to-streaming weirdness. The kind of movies where the quality high bar starts at the asylum and ends with... well, it ends with whatever some guy in his basement with an AI video prompting software can sputter out by the dozen over a weekend. And with very special thanks to TYTD Review's regular and gold-class member of the Good Egg Society, John Cleveland, I was very graciously provided with a copy of something that sits towards the back end of that scale, 2020's Trump vs the Illuminati. A film that, well, I don't outright hate it, but I'm more confused about how it is the way it is and why it is the way it is, to be completely honest. This film is brought to us by BC14. That's not the studio name, it's a guy who changed his name legally to BC14 for some reason. But we aren't here to judge, and before we begin today's review, I do need to give you just a little bit of context because I went into this film completely blind, and about halfway through had to stop the film because I needed to go and Google up exactly what the hell was going on. You see, unless you do your research up front with this one, or you just so happen to be an avid BC14 fan and watch everything he puts out as soon as he puts them out, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this was just one of those weird asylum-adjacent pictures that has a weird and wacky title, but's ultimately a somewhat generic film with a Monster of the Week stapled to it. Well, you'd be wrong, because BC14 has spent the better part of 6 years slowly building his version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And these aren't just like the first wave of crossover Marvel films where you might get like a 5-minute cameo from Captain America or Doctor Strange in an Iron Man or Thor film. All of these films are deeply interconnected and cross over into each other's worlds. Characters from one film can suddenly appear in another and become a prominent part of the lore with absolutely no warning of this anywhere on the packaging. And I really cannot stress this enough, there comes a point with this film where unless you've seen those earlier films, which this film gives you no forewarning about, a lot of this movie will make barely any sense, and to be completely honest, even if you've seen those other two movies, it won't really be that much better. So what is Trump vs the Illuminati all about? Well, the film follows the adventures of a Chinese clone of Donald Trump. If you want to know why there's a Chinese clone of Donald Trump, buckle up, because the opening of the film is just footage of Fallout 3 style PS3 era graphics of destroyed cities with a bad Trump impersonator setting up everything that's happened up to the present day. He explains that in the year 2044, the original Donald Trump was, for some reason, still president, and due to a false flag by AI, accidentally launched the US's nuclear arsenal. This then triggered the apocalypse, essentially, with only a handful of people making it off the planet via spaceships which took them to live on a satellite. Meanwhile, shortly after the nukes launched, the real Donald Trump was assassinated and America essentially disbanded. Meanwhile, deep in a highly secure underground Chinese base, a top-secret lab that was working on a project to clone the president, for some reason, is evacuated. And in the confusion, the clone of Donald Trump flees the base, steals a rocket ship it somehow knows how to pilot, and blasts off into space to escape the nuclear hellfire. After the bombs fell, the AI utilised its powers to drain the Earth of almost all its natural resources to continue to power the AI learning machines, essentially reducing the Earth to almost nothing but collapsing buildings and toxic smog. Meanwhile, while in space, the clone of Trump somehow is attacked by a rogue AI that's able to merge with it, and in doing so, he somehow essentially gains immortality. After some time, Trump's ship crashes on Mars. He's unable to fix it, and so the clone spends around 1,000 years just bumming around on Mars doing donuts in a Mars rover and waiting to be rescued. Meanwhile, in the present day of 3044... either an alien called Aleister Crowley, or the reincarnated soul of Aleister Crowley in an alien's body, or this is just how BC14 assumed Aleister Crowley looked. I don't know. But in either case, he's in communion with an ancient Egyptian god Anubis. Crowley is the lead architect of the Illuminati, and has prophesied that he shall create an Illuminati army that will take over the universe. But Anubis warns Crowley that the prophecy also tells of a lone man, whose actions will destroy the Illuminati for good, assuming he can ascend to his destiny. That man is the clone of Donald Trump. Meanwhile, back on Mars, the clone of Trump is doing his daily routine of radioing an SOS on all frequencies when he actually gets a response in the form of a lady's voice who tells him to head back to his home base where the signal will be stronger and they can communicate more successfully. Trump returns and the voice turns out to be from a good alien. Apparently, battle lines have been drawn between the surviving humans and a faction of good aliens who want to save the universe from the Illuminati, and a faction of bad aliens and an army of random evil beings all being led by Crowley as the Illuminati army under the guidance of Lucifer himself, the big bad dog, Satan. The good aliens offer Clone Trump a chance to escape Mars. But to do so, he must accept their terms, which would involve taking on the prophecy to destroy the Illuminati. Clump refuses as he doesn't believe in destiny, but the aliens basically tell him he's going to end up doing it because of destiny, whether he wants to or not. Meanwhile, Crowley and the army notice strange life signs on Mars and decide to investigate. Clump, who's just woken up, is greeted by several aliens and promptly martial arts his way out of trouble before coming face to face with Crowley. The Illuminati try to intimidate Trump by telling him of their mighty power and to ask him to come quietly and die with dignity. Trump, however, shoots back, saying that they may have power, but he has wealth, and he mentions that he has a storage box full of money on his ship if they're willing to cut a deal. Why aliens from the 31st century would in any way be interested in a load of cash from the 21st century that's no longer worth the paper it's printed on, who knows, I'm here for a fun time, not a long time. Anyway, the aliens decide against cash and go in for the kill, but Trump does a Guardians of the Galaxy style dance-off moment to confuse them, and in the confusion the good aliens manage to lock onto him and beam him aboard their space station. Specifically into the entry chamber of a recently hijacked Illuminati space cruiser. It's been converted to help the Allies, and on board, the good aliens and humanity brief Trump about what he needs to do next. He needs to quite literally go to hell and kill Lucifer, and that, in doing so, the Illuminati will be destroyed. And after some backing and forthing, he finally agrees to go and fulfill the prophecy. He's told that the entrance to hell can be found via a portal on Earth, in Dubai, which is apparently still functioning for some reason. And he's advised that the humans will be sending some backup to help him ensure every chance of success on his mission. That help will come in the form of a B-plot, in which humanity recruit a long off descendant of Van Helsing to travel separately to Trump, rendezvous with him in hell and watch his back. Though that plot detours when Van Helsing's ship gets sidetracked and he winds up on an alien planet where Bigfoot is just kind of chilling. And the pair decide to work together to protect the Trump clone, working as a kind of Chewbacca and Han Solo pairing, but, you know, not as good. And so we begin our final battle, as the war rages amongst the stars and the fate of humanity lies on the shoulders of America's most luminous man. Will Trump defeat the forces of evil and Satan himself? Will Aleister Crowley get to wear a nice hat? And I can't pay my child support, and Bigfoot's on the moon. All this and more will be answered if you check out Trump vs the Illuminati. And I'll be honest, I was going into this film expecting it to be a bit more controversial than it ultimately ended up being. I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump as a political figure is a somewhat controversial one. I personally would rather cross-section my balls with a spud peeler while they were still attached to my body, saute them and eat them while slowly bleeding out in my kitchen than ever share a Travelodge elevator with the man for more than a couple of minutes. Given his track record the first time around, I don't have particularly high hopes that the next 5 years will see an era of American prosperity. Frankly, while I don't wish death on anyone, I think his untimely demise as soon as possible, at this point, could only be a net positive both for the American people and globalism altogether. So when John very kindly sent me this film, part of me wanted nothing to do with it, thinking the world has had enough Trump going on without me adding to it. And part of me thought, well, if I was going to look at this film at any point, doing it now while things are still kinda sorta not completely fucked, rather than leaving it on the shelf and then having to approach this film in the same way people approach Birth of a Nation in a couple of years' time, was probably the best option, honestly. But having actually sat down and watched the film now, I needn't have worried really. Because what this film is, in essence, is one of those weird 15-minute short films that goes out at 3 AM on Adult Swim that are a little disturbing and largely incoherent, only this thing's somehow been extended to 69 minutes long. The script itself is incredibly sloppy and loose, in part because of the aforementioned ties to an expanded universe, meaning huge chunks of the plot are gouged out for other movies to pick up and flesh out, meaning you're very much just expected to go with the flow with a lot of what you see on screen. But also not helping things is the fact that a good 95% of the footage shown on screen is computer generated using stock assets. And because they can't get the mouths of the characters to move particularly well, it means a vast majority of the characters' dialogues are all just read over animated location footage, and the stuff that isn't done that way makes Clutch Cargo look like Lord of the Rings. Because they can't do mouth movements and they're incredibly limited on physical movements as well, it's slightly better than a T-pose and that's about as good as it gets. It means that 90% of this film is just exposition cut to location footage. It's basically all tell and no show. Well, I say no show, the only time it does show is when it wants to do something that makes Trump look goofy, like the Kung Fu alien scene or the dance-off. Trump himself is wearing a spacesuit with an opaque visor for 95% of the runtime, with only a few fleeting glimpses of his face behind the visor, and in those sequences they seemingly couldn't get his mouth to animate, so they just have him talk anyway. The pacing is basically non-existent, the plot simultaneously is super basic, Trump versus the devil, while also being incredibly convoluted with multiple B-plots that just ramble into nothingness. There isn't any kind of act structure to speak of, the dialogue is pretty atrocious, leaning largely into pseudo-philosophical bollocks about what it means to be alive and legacies, while simultaneously not being able to resist Trump making comments about grabbing women by the pussy, his daughter Ivanka, COVID and having tiny hands. I think the biggest problem I have with this film from a script perspective is it feels like BC-14 is trying to have his cake and eat it too, by simultaneously poking fun of Trump, clone or otherwise, while also establishing him as the saviour of the universe and God King Emperor, while also trying to cover for the Trump love-in by making it clear that this is a clone of Trump, definitely not the Trump, and that clones shouldn't be held to the damnation of the original as they share genes, but that's where the line begins and ends. It feels a bit like he's both siding a clearly controversial individual to try and appeal to all sides. But the problem with that is, if you swapped Trump out for literally any other monster from history, be it Margaret Thatcher or Osama bin Laden, Reagan or Pol Pot, if you played the movie in the same way but with those people, it would become quite black and white that trying to paint these figures in any other light than the light they deserve is essentially giving them the thumbs up, clone or otherwise. And to be honest, I'm kind of bored with trying to redefine bad people as defenders of the people and crusaders fighting for the truth. They're arseholes. It doesn't just end with Trump though. The film really can't decide what tone or lane it wants to work within. It's presenting like a straight science fiction film with fantasy elements, but it's also trying to be a comedy, then briefly it turns into a sci-fi action film, then a monster movie. It's all over the place, and the inconsistencies really threw me out of the vibe multiple times across the runtime. The comedy is generic and for 2020 is basically mining from an empty shaft. We're talking gags here that had been done to death in 2016, here getting dragged from their coffins 4 years past their sell-by date. The action and science fiction elements are present visually, but not at all recognised in the dialogue. I'd say that for a good 80% of the film's runtime, you could strip the visuals away and no one would know the time period that this film was supposed to be taking place in. And that is very much not a good thing. Add to that the film essentially just stops at 69 minutes in with half a dozen plot threads left unresolved, the main plot line only partially dealt with, and the Trump clone, as of the time of writing and at least to the best of my research, essentially MIA from any of the other entries in this universe. It means essentially even if you did get involved in the plot line, tough shit, you'll get crumbs over the next dozen or so movies and nothing else. All this combined results in a jarring viewing experience that feels more like someone's first draft showreel made of unedited shoot rushes stitched together incoherently than it does an actual movie. I don't think watching this film will make your blood boil because it isn't exactly a Trump love-in, but because it's so vague as to exactly which side of the aisle it falls on, and that is critical in understanding this work's intentions, it left me genuinely a bit lost as to whether this is just an outright failed parody or some kind of bizarre Trump fanfic. In either case, it really didn't do it for me. As mentioned, the script was written and directed by BC14, who has 134 writing credits and 35 directing credits. On both fronts, he seems to have mainly worked in direct-to-DVD and direct-to-streaming fodder, with the writing side being heavily padded out with holiday-themed movies like Santa Saves the Universe or Frankenstein Ruins Halloween, or just generic kids films like multiple entries in the Avenger Dogs franchise or the 00K9 series. On the direction front, however, he is more oriented around horror and science fiction films, with titles such as Mason and Dracula Closer Than We Think, The Circle of Death, and Space Masons and the Alien Conspiracy. While I don't think we're exactly dealing with a Dustin Ferguson type here, it's clear to see that BC churns movies out at a frankly concerning rate. I mean, I'm writing this in March 2025, and he's already released 2 movies and 3 episodes of 2 different horror host series, and I cannot stress enough that I am beyond morbidly curious in particular to check out his Christmas films. As for the direction in this film, there's really not much to say that hasn't been said already. This is a cacophony of low-resolution animation. I can be kind and say, well hey, at least BC kept most of the animation styles kind of similar. It's not like we're shaking up completely different art styles together like The Incredible Bulk or cherry-picking different genres and mashing them together. But the problem here is almost the entire opposite issue. Given the budget and scope for this project, he seems to only be able to use generic assets, with the majority of the budget for visuals going on buying the handful of models and assets he didn't already own. This in turn leads to probably the most significant problem with the film, which is we end up reusing assets with slight variations constantly, even when it isn't really suited for it. Almost all of the human or good alien characters use the exact same character models, just with slight colour variation. All the bad aliens literally use one of 2 models for the full runtime, but to help differentiate them, some aliens will get an accessory to help tell them apart, whether it's a headset or a skin colour change, but that's about it. Clone Trump gets his own spacesuit, but a very similar spacesuit model is used with colour swap outs multiple times across the runtime. And it's not just the characters, locations will get slight tweaks and then be played up as completely different locations. Occasionally, it'll cut to live-action stock footage, which feels very unsettling when you've spent 20 minutes with PS3 graphics. A not insignificant chunk of this feels like the kind of stock royalty-free backing footage you can license from websites. But while those moments of stock footage are supposed to be used very fleetingly amongst a lot of other original footage, here, those chunks of footage can sometimes be the beginning and end of scenes. Obviously, when you're working almost entirely in computer-generated imagery, the camera, so to speak, is entirely virtual. So it's quite critical that the director's vision is clear, because without a clear understanding of where you want the camera to be looking, you're just going to end up with a load of randomly placed shots. Here, it feels like BC gets it about 25% of the time. There's literally a handful of moments in this where I feel like a clear creative choice was made for where the camera placement should be, but for the remaining 75%, it feels aimless. It feels like it was either just left where it loaded or it's been dragged right up to whatever's going on and not so much placed, more abandoned on a key figure. Like an extreme close-up on a face, or a long slow zoom into an item while Clone Trump monologues. Which, as mentioned, is commonplace here as a way to save on animating the characters' mouths. They'll just cut to a space scene and have a voice actor reel out 3 to 5 minutes of lore. It's ridiculous. To that end, cast direction seems vaguely DOA as well. It seems like BC got the cast to make up a voice, and when they landed on one he liked, they just stuck with it whether it actually worked for the character or not. As most of the cast's vocal performances are fairly cartoonish or exaggeratory, it means there isn't really a whole lot of actual cast direction going on. BC basically seems to have just let the cast loose in character, and I'd honestly be surprised if retakes were even irregularly considered. 1 or 2 takes and then move on seems to be the order of the day. Which leads me nicely to the performances themselves. I didn't much care for them. I don't think they're inherently awful performances, given every man, woman, child and bollock on the planet can do at least a vague Trump impression. I think Timothy Banfield does a recognisable job. Not the best I've ever heard, but far from the worst. But everyone beyond that just sounds so generic and artificial, to the point that until the credits came up and I IMDb'd it to make sure these were actual real people, I was convinced that the majority of these performances were being done by text-to-speech software and a voice cloner. In fact, even knowing these people are in fact people, I still don't fully believe that BC didn't do at least a little bit of voice cloning in places to smooth over scenes or grab a few missed lines to flesh things out. But being honest, if I'm comparing your real, honest-to-God human performance to that of a computer's attempt, well, I hope you can appreciate why I struggled to really appreciate any of the efforts of the cast here. And finally, the soundtrack. It's stock tracks. Stock sounding stock tracks that fit the film in the same way one-size-fits-all latex covers my arse cheeks on a Sunday night. God bless you, Reverend. It's so generic as to be forgettable, MIDI orchestral music and synth-heavy compositions that sometimes drown out the performances and add basically nothing that an air conditioner hum wouldn't have contributed of equal success. I was not a fan. Trump vs the Illuminati was released on DVD in 2020 by Ruthless Films. No extras to speak of, it's a little overly compressed and it didn't get a Blu-ray, or at least it hasn't had one at the time of recording. It went to streaming around the same time and it's currently available on Amazon Prime and Tubi, if you're feeling particularly masochistic. And that's it. To be honest, I wouldn't get your hopes up for a 4K anytime soon. Trump vs the Illuminati is a bad film on multiple levels. I appreciate BC's attempt at creating an expanded universe, but if I have to watch 10 plus films just to have the vaguest of clues as to what the fuck is going on, I don't think the mission's been successful. This feels like a Damien Hirst project, a cross-section of a movie that needs the other 16 slides to make up the full beast. And I don't really want that when I'm tuning into what I think is a solo feature. With a script that felt compelled to waste as much of my time as possible, poor direction and animation work, dreary and generic performances and scoring, and the overall feeling that this is a film attempting to pander to both sides of a controversial figure to try and maximise profit in the most pandering and patronising way, I came very close to listing this as one of the worst films I've ever seen. In fact, had it not been for the 2 or 3 instances where the director injected some comedy that felt very fourth wall level self-aware on a media literacy level, and the fact that it never really does anything that abjectly makes my blood pressure rise, it narrowly manages to avoid going into the crushy bin for me. But it's knife's edge close. Not one I'd recommend, it's dull, drawn out, and there's way better worse stuff out there.